Hey world, it's Ben when to come back to another video. Now family, I want to come back to this video with some information because like I told you, the Tell a Lie video is not going to break it down to where we as individuals can understand the impact of the stimulus bill, the winners and losers of the bill, and what happens going forward. Because remember family, it's $2.2 trillion that was approved by the government. Congress and the Senate signed off for it, and then, of course, the President signed off. Remember, there are a couple of things that have to happen before this can happen. Now, for 3 weeks, most of us have been, locked down in our houses, in our places of residence, and many of us have, been off work. Many of us are hourly wage workers, so you haven't been getting paid. And many of us have been laid off due to this particular circumstance. So with such a stimulus check or such a stimulus bill being passed, you would think that everyone would be sufficiently, compensated for something that was beyond their control. Remember, if it's out of your control, then you shouldn't be worried about it. But when you have a situation like this, you have to break it down to see exactly if those that represent us and those that represent you who are voters did what was best for us, because as representatives, remember, leaders serve. See, leaders don't just lead by words, leaders serve through actions. You dig? If you haven't got a chance to like, share, and subscribe to videos, please do so. I really appreciate the love, and it's a very humbling experience. I look at the bill as $2.2 trillion, family. And let's just see how much of the money, when you break that down, goes to those who are really in need. Well, according to the bill, there's going to be roughly $350 billion going to the public, going to citizens, in the amount of $1,200 to each individual, and I think an additional $500 per child. And then roughly coming out to like $3,400 $3,400 check, which is a stimulus check that's supposed to go to everybody. Of course, there are some stipulations. If you made over $99,000 a year, you can't get it. I think if you haven't filed your taxes in the last couple of years, you can't get it. So there are some other stipulations in this bill that pretty much says not everyone is going to get it. Okay, undocumented workers, illegal immigrants, so on and so forth. So not everyone is going to get it. So everyone that contributed to the GDP, that contributed to the building of this great economy, everyone that done that, well, most of those people are not going to be eligible for the stimulus check. And that check's supposed to be reaching you in another 2 to 3 weeks. But I digress. Like I said, $350 billion of that money is supposed to go to the citizens in the form of stimulus checks. You got another $250 billion that's supposed to go to the unemployment fund, where if you are receiving unemployment, there's going to be an additional $600 a week that you'll be able to get. Now, that was a sticking point with most of the Republicans because they felt that giving you this extra $600 would disincentivize you into going to work, as if to say, well, if we give them an extra $600 a week for unemployment, then they may not want to go to work, because some people's unemployment check with the addition of that $600 may be more than the check they receive at work. So common sense tells you, let me just collect my unemployment. But the Republicans said, that was one of the sticking points. And so, once again, if they meaning the Republicans, Democrats, all senators, all congressmen, everybody in politics, if they had to live off the same Social Security that we as citizens have to live off of, I promise you, this allotment or how they allocated this money would be allocated a lot differently. But I digress. So we got $350 billion going to us, $250 billion going to unemployment fund. But this is where it gets tricky. You got $800 billion going to big corporations and small businesses. Now, if small businesses, which employ 500 or less, are the most in need of the money, why would you give them less than you give the big corporations? I mean, these big corporations have mad cash. The small businesses are the ones that should have been, receiving more than $850 billion. See, they designated $350 billion to small businesses and $500 billion to big businesses. Does that make sense to you? And remember, this $1,200 check that you're going to receive, that's one time. So they're going to have to come, what's going to happen in May? In June? Okay? And so when you see that they allocated $100 billion to the hospitals, now family, remember, the third leading cause of death in America, to Americans, are medical mistakes, hospital negligence, doctor malpractices. And they finna get $100 billion. There's actually an extra $45 billion that they're going to put into what they call the disaster relief fund. Now, if we are in a time of disaster right now, why would you have to put $45 billion in a fund? You would think that $45 billion would be added to the $350 billion to make sure that the citizens are covered in the form of no mortgages, no rent, no utilities, no bills, no student loans, no car loans. Suspend that. I mean, if you're going to tell us to put us in the house for the next 6 weeks or whatnot, then we should not be paying any bills. And I mean, no one should. Because this basically is what they call a low-key bailout. $850 billion to corporations, and only citizens get $1,200 a month, $1,200 in this one check. When Canada is giving their citizens $1,375 each person, which you got to also really understand that in Canada, they have what they call a Canada Child Benefit Plan, where every family receives a check for the cost of raising their children. Every family. And it's tax-free. I didn't say child support. I didn't say welfare. I said every family that has children receives, up to $6,600, to the lowest like $5,600. But imagine that. That's like $500-something. And during this time of the coronavirus, Canada has increased that by $500. So now if you're getting $500 for your Canada Child Benefit check a month, now that's $1,000 on top of the $1,375. Okay? Canada designated millions of dollars. They designated $158 million to help at-risk homeless people, to prevent people from being homeless. They also contributed $50 million to women's shelters and sexual assault centers. See, $305 million to the indigenous communities. Now, when you look at what Canada has done, and they only have 35 million people, population, they had a $1.8 billion stimulus bill where the majority of all the stimulus bill monies went to the public, went to the people. But then when you look at our $2.2 trillion stimulus bill, only $550 billion is going to us. And I just say, I'm not going to say $550 billion. I'm just going to say $350 billion, because $350 billion is what they're going to use to allocate the stimulus checks being sent to people. But then what's going to happen next month and the month after that? So please, family, don't be satisfied with the crumbs. Now, pay yourself first, because I promise you, even 401ks is a scam. Family, in the meantime, between time, may the Most High Inside bring you joy and being with His out of 5,000.